Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Showcast, a series of candid conversations from the world of film brought to you by the Film Verdict and hosted by yours truly, Matt Micucci. And today we'll be speaking with director Mara Tamkovich, making her feature directorial debut with Under the Grey Sky, which is competing in the international narrative competition of the 2024 Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. The film is inspired by a true story of a couple of Belarusian journalists and their struggle to remain true to their cause and loyal to each other during their fight against the repressions and oppressions suffocating Belarus after the protests of 2020. In this conversation, we'll be talking about the film, the true story that inspired it, and its political context. And we'll also be finding out more about Tamkovich, her background in journalism, and her journey in movies. So fire up an Audio Teeny and listen to the audio waves as they fly through the air. This is the Showcast. Hello, Mara. Welcome to the Showcast.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you here speaking from the Tribeca Film Festival at the moment, right?
Yes.
This is really exciting. Your film is premiering Under the Grey Sky. Your film is called, and I had the pleasure of watching it. I'm looking forward to talking about it, but usually what I like to do is I like to start my conversations with artists I speak with for the first time for this podcast series by breaking the ice and asking a very simple question. What's your earliest memory of cinema?
Well, I have two, actually. The earliest memory of my favorite film and the way I started to dive into the world which is portrayed in the film. I had a VHS tape with Titanic on it when I was like 9. And at some point, I watched it so many times that I knew the film very well. And what I started to do is just, to watch the part when everything is good up until the iceberg shows up. Because starting from this point, it was too sad. And then rewind and watch it again. I don't know if that counts like the earliest memory connected with the film, but somehow starting from then, I have my favorite stuff that I watch all over again to dive into the atmosphere of something.
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent story, and I always appreciate anybody mentioning VHS. Because I'm also of the
now
generation.
Now you know how old I am.
No, I'm also of the generation of the VHS, man. I still miss those days. Then you transitioned to beginning to think about making your own films. When did that begin to happen? When did you start thinking that maybe in your future you'd like to make your own movies?
Actually, it started pretty late on. I was born in Belarus and I lived in Belarus till I was 17. And then I left to Poland to study journalism. And I come from a family of journalists. My dad was an independent journalist in Belarus. So somehow that career path felt like a natural way. And I actually used to be a journalist myself for 10 years after moving to Poland. The filmmaking at that time seemed like an absolutely unrealistic dream. It wasn't even something on the radar. I think I could not just have imagined that might be possible one day that I might be making movies. So the films came later when I was living in Poland and being an independent journalist for Belarusian media broadcasting from the exile from abroad to deliver the independent information to Belarusians. Well, it brought its challenges, first of all, because I lived in a different place and in a different context than the one I worked in. So obviously it was a bit, distorted reality for me. In a very important part of the life in your 20s when you try to find out, who you are and where do you belong. So somehow film grew out of being a journalist, and being in Poland, it did not seem like an impossible thing anymore. I was around 24. I remember my conversation with my mom when I told her that, Mom, I think I'm going to be a film director. She was like, being a political TV journalist was not enough for you, right? Why can't you choose a normal profession?
Yeah. This is something that maybe we should get into a little more, especially because, to introduce the film a little bit. Simple question, but I'd like to hear your definition of it. What do you mean when you say independent journalism?
Actually, in this case, speaking about the journalism in Belarus, it just means it's not governmentally owned media. So it's not a deep, philosophical term or something. It's just, it's a very clear mark in Belarusian media reality. There are propaganda media and there are media which are not propaganda, and we call them independent in this sort of way. Yeah.
Let's bring it to this film now that you're presenting in Tribeca, because it also revolves around what happened in 2020 in Belarus. So again, just to provide a little bit of context, what is it that happened?
Well, Belarus is ruled by Alexander Lukashenko since 1994. He's been a president for 30 years now. And in 2020, we had yet one more elections, which were rigged by Lukashenko. But this time, for the first time, the protest within people in Belarus and the determination to get a new beginning and to get rid of Lukashenko as their president was extremely strong. A lot of reasons might be named. But so after he yet again rigged the presidential election, people went out to the streets and they protested and demanded to be paid attention to be listened to be respected, and to have their votes counted, which ended up in a huge stream of violence and brutal pacification of peaceful demonstrations, and also in murdering several protesters in the streets under different circumstances. The protests lasted for months, but ultimately they were put down, and now Belarus has descended in a totalitarian state. The repressions are happening on the wider scale than they ever had. People go to jail for literally liking a comment under a Facebook post. So in a very short description, that is what happened.
Yeah, it's very frightening, of course. And obviously your film is really seen from the perspective or focuses on the people who try to inform others in the country and also outside of the country of what's happening there. This is a true story, we should emphasize, right?
The film is inspired by the true story. Yes, I'm always very careful calling it literally a true story because, it's a fiction film. But the inspiration underneath is real. And there is a real journalist who inspired me to make this film, yes.
So what is the story that inspired this film exactly?
It's a story of a journalist, Katerina Andreeva. She worked for Belsat TV. It's a TV station that broadcasts to Belarus from Poland, the independent TV station, as I've mentioned before. She was doing live streams from the protests in Minsk. And during one of these live streams, which happened pretty late on into the protest, it was already 3 months into the protest, she was broadcasting from an apartment. And she got tracked down by a drone together with her camera woman, and they were arrested and first sentenced to a 7-day arrest. Then the criminal charges were brought against, and they were sent to prison for 2 years. And when she had 6 months left on her sentence, she got accused of high treason. So now she's serving the prison term of 8 years and 3 months in Belarusian penal colony.
Yeah, again, frightening story, of course. And, there's so many nuances in your film that really show the insight of what happens. But also, I feel like you wanted to highlight the human aspect of the tale, right?
Yes, of course. First of all, for me, it's not a film about politics. I'm always asked about the politics because, there is not so much stories about Belarus out there, especially in fiction, in a film fiction world, But it's not a political statement, the film. It's not, a documentary on the political situation. It's a very human story. And what was the most interesting for me in exploring this story is how this couple, because it tells the story of a female protagonist, a journalist, and her husband going through the protest and the repercussions of their actions. So this human aspect was really important to me. And I think that somehow on the human level, you can relate to it, whether you know anything about Belarus or whether you don't,
Yeah. And actually, speaking of that, what is it that interested you in terms of the human aspect about this tale? Because obviously the protagonists of your film, they go through something that it's extreme situations, but still there are aspects of it that you can connect with.
Well, actually, in terms of Belarusian reality, it's just the other way around. This story was interesting and captivating for me exactly because of the fact that so many Belarusians go through those kind of choices every day. I think that everyone at least knows someone who had to make this kind of choice, who had to face the question whether we stay in the country or whether we leave. Where do we put ourselves towards what's happening in the country? So in this way, the story, which focuses on this particular couple, also represents the wider, choices that made in Belarus, and also in my understanding, people make all over the world facing a difficult situation, facing this fight or flight kind of choice. Yes, so it's pretty universal in my understanding.
And do you find that the audience in Tribeca was able to perceive it as such?
I think so. It's always difficult, to estimate how did people actually, watched your film, because no one will tell you it's bad, to your face after the premiere screening. But I had those kind of conversations with people who related to the stories in a very, particular way through their own experience and through their own perspective, being from somewhere very different and still finding something that resonates with their own experience in the film. Yes.
Well, let's talk about your experience of making the film, actually, because this is your debut film. And, to me, it seems like such a heavy theme or topic to tackle for your first film. But I think, when you're talking about people wanting to ask you questions about the political aspect, what would interest me, after watching this, I just thought, impulsively maybe what your protagonist goes through, she's feeling she's paying the price for what she does. There's a lot of people that want to stop her from doing what she does, from her work doing independent journalism. Did you feel hostility in making this film? Did you encounter any challenges from people who wanted to stop you doing what you wanted to do?
Actually, the other way around. The film was produced in Poland and is fully financed in Poland as well, majorly by Polish Film Institute. And during the whole production process, I felt huge support from everyone, literally, from people who got involved in the production, from people who worked on set, from the Polish Film Institute, who decided to support the film very quickly. I really felt that people had this need within them to do something about this situation that is happening very closely to them. They were really moved and involved in the process. So in these terms, yes, huge support. That would be it.
So again, I talked about this being your first film, and now I just want to focus on the artistic aspects of it. Feature debut, directorial debut is always, of course, a huge stepping stone for any filmmaker. But what were the challenges that you faced in making this film? It could be in terms of like just producing it, putting it all together, or even in your rapport with the actors.
This film is made on a very tight budget. So obviously it was a very obvious challenge to face it, especially that we had to shoot in Poland and to recreate the Belarusian reality somewhere else, having very limited means to build anything. We had very limited amount of shooting days as well. So we had to fit it into 15 shooting days. We also did it on a tight timeline, because I really wanted to have this film made. And when the opportunity presented itself to have it made within 1 year with smaller budget, but the one that you can get easily and quickly, I decided to go with that. But that brought its own challenges. And in terms of, what you see on the screen, what was very important to me in putting the story together and literally in every aspect of it, in thinking about where to put the camera and how would the film sound and how would the actors do their job, how would they perform. It was to make it very within. I try to avoid pushing on the obvious emotional buttons. I try not to manipulate my audience into feeling stuff, not to force the audience into the emotions I try to portray. I try to leave, as much space for the audience to get their own emotions in the film as possible, and try to be very careful with this tear-pushing kind of narrative, because it's a very, it's a very emotional and tense story itself, and it seemed so easy to get it a little bit over the top. Also, for me, it's an anti-monumental film. It's not a film that is trying to make a hero of someone. It's actually an anti-heroic film. It's a film about the cost you are paying and growing to the actual cost of your decisions, and showing this other side of something that might seem as a very heroic behavior in the news, yes, but there is this very real price, and that was the area I was interested in exploring. How do you go through it, being just a human, not a hero from someone's imagination.
Well, Mara, absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us and talking with us about Under the Grey Sky. It's been great, and great film. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed another Showcast conversation. There'll be plenty more coming your way over the next few days, including from the Audiovisual Producers Summit in Reggio Calabria, Italy, the Annecy International Animation Film Festival and Market, and the Mediterranee Film Festival in Malta, and so on. So whether you're working in film or love movies, we've got a wide range of podcast conversations for you to sink your ears into, and you can find them over at filmverdictnetwork.com. Or you can look for TFV Network wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to follow us so you never miss a new episode. Till the next time, from The Film Verdict, this is Matt Micucci signing off. See you soon.